Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm going to run through a few quick announcements that should take less than 5 minutes, and then we'll begin the presentation. My name is Nate Woodard, and I'm an account manager here at GoEngineer. Just a little bit about me. Over the past 18 years, I have been in a variety of roles selling and supporting engineering, design, and verification products. At GoEngineer, I focus on electromagnetic simulation and model-based systems engineering, which are both part of our advanced simulation group. I'll share more on what I mean by advanced simulation on the next slide. It has been a pleasure to prepare today's presentation on this exciting topic with some great colleagues, one of which is today's co-host, Clint Patton. Clint is an electromagnetics application engineer here at GoEngineer, and he has about 15 years of experience in a variety of EMI and RF design roles. He brings a depth and breadth to our EMAG team that enables us to provide world-class support to our client base. It was also an honor to work with today's co-presenter, Carl De Souza, and I will give him a proper introduction when his presentation comes up a bit later. So I mentioned our advanced simulation group there on the last slide. Let me clarify what I mean when I say advanced simulation, or advanced sim for short. Advanced sim refers to the simulation tools from Dassault systems, including Abacus for finite element analysis, PowerFlow and XFlow for computational fluid dynamics, CST Studio Suite, which of course is the focus of today's presentation, as well as the entire suite of 3D experience simulation tools. Today's webinar focuses on how CST Studio Suite enables engineers to design medical devices that have important electromagnetic effects that they need to understand and optimize. GoEngineer's Advanced Sim group sells and supports all of these high-end simulation products nationwide. I have just a few more things to mention about GoEngineer, and then we'll dive right in. GoEngineer is probably best known as the largest SolidWorks reseller globally, but we also have an entire portfolio of design and rapid prototyping solutions to meet your product design needs. We have over 30 offices across the US and Canada, 150 certified tech specialists, and 600 employees in total. While some of you are familiar with and already engaged with our top-notch sales, support, and training related to SolidWorks, a lesser-known fact is that we also offer world-class experience in the area of additive manufacturing. We sell, service, and support several brands of 3D printers covering a range of technologies from FDM, PolyJet, metals, and a few others. And we also can provide printed parts as a service. We have similar capabilities for 3D scanners as well. We'd love to share our experience with you on any of these areas to help you grow and innovate. All right, that's it for the housekeeping items. Now we can get started on what you really came here for today. Now I have the honor to introduce our first presenter, Carl De Souza. Carl has over 25 years of experience in computer-aided engineering and specializes in technology consulting, product management, and business development as they pertain to simulation-based solutions. His current role with Dassault Systems is focused on expanding the use of modeling and simulation in life sciences and healthcare. Carl's presentation introduces an example from the perspective of a SolidWorks user, and he covers a few types of analyses that can be done before we take a deeper dive into electromagnetic simulation. Carl, please take it from here.
Thanks for that introduction, and hello to everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar today. I'm going to briefly introduce the idea of simulation using the 3D Experience platform for SolidWorks users. And before we get there, and I pass it over to my colleagues over at GoEngineer, let's do a little bit of an introduction to kind of take stock of where we are and where we want to go. So let's look a little bit at the industry challenges and trends, primarily as they affect medical devices and equipment. I think most of you would agree that the key challenges you face as makers of medical devices and equipment are, of course, the growing product development times and cost. And things have gone from perhaps development cycles that could span multiple years and perhaps be many millions of dollars. Now, of course, this depends on the device category we're talking about. But nonetheless, I think it's certainly true that what we're hearing from our customers is how can they use our tools and simulation in particular to be able to reduce these extensive times and cost. Now, there is a dependence of the time and cost on the fact that there is a very high reliance on physical testing today in medical devices, as opposed to, say, the automotive or aerospace industry. And if there's anything we can do to reduce this reliance on physical testing, again, through use of virtual testing or simulation, that would go a great way in accelerating time to market. However, the other problem is that devices themselves are becoming more complicated, and this is introducing challenges in being able to understand how these devices perform in the real world under a range of operating conditions, and also becomes challenging to make sure the simulations are being able to capture those real-world environmental situations. In addition, of course, there continues to be a risk of adverse events, which negatively impacts a company from a regulatory perspective, and patients themselves are becoming more demanding in the terms of the types of devices they accept, and the degree to which they'd like these devices to be personalized. So what does this all mean? So let's look at some of these challenges with the help of an example. And so what you see here is a fictional device that we call the ISO device. It stands as the Greek goddess of healing. And it's intended to represent a real-world drug delivery device. In this case, it's a combination product, which means both the drug and the mechanism for delivering it, the device itself, are both regulated. In this case, it's for oncology treatment. And as you can see here, it's made up of a number of parts. There's an outer casing enclosing, of course, the drug itself, the drug delivery mechanism, which in this case is a peristaltic pump, and then some onboard circuitry for assessing what's happening at the patient itself. And this is something that you wear on your wrist. It can monitor the patient via certain sensors, and it also has some communication and computational capability on board to be able to communicate results to perhaps a physician or to the cloud, where remedial actions can be taken depending on what's being seen. So let's say we have this device now, and we're trying to improve it for a subsequent release based on some maybe market requirements that we have. To make things more concrete, we've looked at 4 requirements in this case. One is improving the device's structural integrity. In this case, we're going to do that, for instance, by assessing its robustness or reliability when it comes to accidental drop. We might also want to look at its manufacturability. In this case, we've gotten feedback. We'd like to make the manufacturing process more efficient by better understanding the impact of the design on the plastics injection molding process. We also want to increase the efficiency of the drug delivery itself, perhaps by changing the mechanism or by understanding the impact of drug viscosity, for instance, and so on. And finally, because, as I said, this is a smart device, and because you're all here to understand about electromagnetics, we want to conduct a couple of electromagnetic simulations to understand the impact of antenna design and placement and its influence on human safety. So to do all of this, we're going to be using the 3D Experience Works portfolio. And very briefly, this portfolio is aimed at SolidWorks customers to help them transform the product development process for accelerated innovation. It's essentially achieved through a cloud-based, fully integrated end-to-end solution for collaborative product development on the 3D Experience platform. And it brings together essentially a wide range of stakeholders, ranging from design and engineering, simulation, manufacturing, governance, marketing, sales, and so on. What I want to talk to you about today, of course, is simply the synergy between modeling with SolidWorks and simulation on the 3D Experience platform on the cloud. Okay, so when we talk about the simulation, the capabilities that we're talking about are as shown here. So essentially the simulation portfolio within SolidWorks, within the 3D Experience Works portfolio encompasses structure simulation, fluids, electromagnetics, plastics injection molding, and rigid body dynamics, as you see here. Okay, let's spend a few minutes talking about what exactly we mean by unified modeling and simulation, or what we call MODSIM. Essentially, the idea here is to bring together all the aspects of product development within an integrated environment. This MODSIM approach entails seamless traceability and interoperability between the requirements, collaboration, design, and simulation without any loss of data or any import and export or various file formats, as is the case today when you're using siloed processes or disconnected point solutions. Now, the MODSIM approach enables SolidWorks users to accelerate product development by leveraging this tight integration between SolidWorks and the 3D Experience platform. This makes it very easy for product development teams to capture requirements, to track project progress, communicate updates with stakeholders, and of course, leverage very powerful simulations to drive design improvements. And all of this within this fully integrated and collaborative environment. So now what I want to show you in the next few minutes is really how engineers can quickly access their CAD models from SolidWorks, how they can perform physics-based simulations, or multidisciplinary ones at that, how they can easily go back to SolidWorks to make design changes based on those results if needed, and then, of course, how they can easily update and compare simulation results of product performance. And again, to do that, we'll use the example of the ISO device shown here. We have conducted webinars where we talk through various different multidisciplinary processes using this device. Today, I just want to talk about two of them. I'm going to briefly talk to you about plastics injection molding, which is a very popular manufacturing process within medical devices because so many devices happen to include plastic components, either for the casing or internal components or what have you. And then I'll pass it over to my colleagues from GoEngineer to tell you more about the electromagnetic simulations. Okay, so let's get started. So what we're talking about here is about how we can improve the manufacturability of our device by simulating and optimizing the plastics injection molding process. We're going to do that using the plastic injection engineer role, which is part of the simulation portfolio on 3D Experience Works, as I just mentioned. And it allows us to validate and optimize the injection molded part designs very, very earlier on in the product development process. It has a number of very interesting features that you'll see in a bit. It has this very nice design-centric guided user interface that allows non-experts to be able to quite easily use and leverage the benefits of this technology. It automates a lot of the manual and tedious processes like meshing and so on. It does come with an extensive plastics material library. And this is, again, really useful for non-experts who can quickly explore the impact of different plastic types and their properties on the mold filling process. In addition, it has a number of other important features, and it also provides an abacus-based solver that allows you to simulate the warping process once your injection is complete. So let me try and show you some of these using a small demonstration. So what you see here is this ISO device in SolidWorks, an interface that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. And let me play this video and show you how this process works. So we are in SolidWorks. This is the bottom and the top casing. This is what we want to improve the manufacturability of. So the first thing we do is we quite simply, from within SolidWorks itself, we can access and launch the 3D Experience platform. In this case, we want to launch the 3D Experience plastics injection molding solution. That brings us onto the 3D Experience platform, as you see here. And you'll notice on the top right is a guided interface, which highlights for you the steps that you need to take in order to be able to successfully conduct a plastics injection simulation. They're very simplified. So for instance, it begins by selecting the parts that need to be simulated. Once you've done that, you then assign the material behavior for those parts. That's the plastic material behavior. You can do that directly by specifying the material properties if you know them, or as I said before, you can access this extensive library of plastic materials and simply choose a material that you think you'd be manufacturing this part from. Once you do that, you then specify the scenario conditions, as in where the mold is going to be filled from. It could be a single gate location, it could be multiple gate locations, a few other conditions that need to be set up in terms of boundary conditions for this problem. And that's it. Very simply, you can then launch the simulation. You can run the simulation on the cloud, as I said before, and very quickly you get the results of the plastic filling simulation process itself. Now, you can examine these results and you can see if they meet your requirements. In this case, they do not. And as you'll see here, there are regions where the fluid does not completely fill those regions as desired. And of course, we don't want something like that in reality. So what do we do here? We now that we know where the problem lies, we go back into SolidWorks and we make design changes that we believe might address this problem. That's one way to go around it. Of course, you could change the plastic that you're using, you could change the gate locations, you could do multiple things. But in this case, we're going back to demonstrate how easy this is. We're showing you the process where you go back into SolidWorks and you make your design modifications. In this case, the designer has decided to increase the thickness of those areas which weren't being filled appropriately. Of course, that's very easy to do in SolidWorks. And the good news is that when you come back to the 3D Experience platform the second time, or the third time, or whatever time it is, you do not need to go through any of the tedious steps that you went through before. Once you launch the plastics injection app, you're back onto the platform, and you're pretty much where you left off. All you need to do now is simply solve for this modified design. Again, as before, we can run these simulations, and we can see now that in this case, we do not see those short shots that you had before, and everything is much better. As I mentioned, we can also conduct more advanced simulations like the warping analysis to make sure that things are within acceptable limits. That's it. So essentially, you can run a number of other processes, other simulation, other workflows to make sure that your device manufacturability is as desired, and that the as manufactured part is going to be as close to the as designed part as possible. Right. So that's what makes it so easy to do. End this over here. And as I said before, now that you've seen that injection simulation, I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues at GoEngineer to tell you a little bit about continuing the multidisciplinary simulation, in this case, doing it with an electromagnetic analysis. With that, thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this webinar.
Thanks, Carl. That was a great introduction to the concept of MODSIM using the 3D Experience simulation platform. Like Carl said, I'm going to take a closer look at the EMAG portion of this design, focusing on antenna placement and the human exposure and safety considerations to design for. As Carl mentioned, the IASO is a smart drug delivery device, and it stores and transmits patient data wirelessly to a phone using Bluetooth communication. Therefore, the device needs to be equipped with an antenna that operates in the Bluetooth frequency range. I'm going to walk you through how we accomplish this using the Electromagnetics engineer role, which is part of the 3D Experience simulation platform that Carl introduced. The Electromagnetics engineer role, just like CST, provides high-performance 3D electromagnetic simulation for designing, analyzing, and optimizing electromagnetic components and systems on the 3D Experience platform. The role is fundamentally built upon the CST technology and is just another way to access all the capabilities that come with CST. You can see some of the key attributes here in the bottom left. The workflow begins in SOLIDWORKS with the parameterized antenna design in the ISO model, which you can see in red. You save the model to the 3D Experience platform. This SOLIDWORKS model is launched into the Electromagnetic Engineer role, which leverages CST technology. Next, you will set up the simulation and define field monitors, which dictate the type of results to be viewed, and then you save the model to the 3D Experience platform to prepare it to solve. The electromagnetic simulation is run on the 3D Experience cloud using the Simulation Manager app. The cloud makes it easy to set up and accessible to those of you that don't have HPC resources available. You can see job status right in the browser as well. Next, you can view results using the Physics Simulation Review app. We start with 0 and 1D results to see things like impedance and S parameters. And here we see that the center frequency and return loss do not meet our requirements. So we need to go back into SOLIDWORKS and modify the design. We change the length of the antenna in the parameter list, and then we save the model back to the 3D Experience platform. Then we reopen CST Studio Suite and check for a CAD update. And then we do a parametric update, and the model is ready to rerun on the cloud. The updated results show that both the center frequency and return loss are now in specification. Next, we can look at far-field results and see that the antenna directivity has also improved with the design modifications. Then we look at the E-field, and even though the scaling between the two models is a little bit off, you can still see that the E-field for an input pulse has increased in the new design as well. And that wraps up the antenna design and optimization part of the workflow that I wanted to show you today. But there's one more thing to look at, and it's how to optimize this design with human exposure in mind. We need a drug delivery device that is not only smart, but also safe. We need to ensure that the radiation from the antenna within the device is under the limits specified by FCC for the safety of the patient wearing the device. We start by placing the device on a human hand model. This is a voxel model containing material properties similar to that of a human body. A great feature of the human body models included with CST is the posing ability, allowing you to create real-world use cases. Next, we will set up the simulation and define field monitors, which dictate the type of results to be viewed, just like we did in the previous analysis. We're going to be looking at SAR, otherwise known as power loss density. And then we'll make some refinement settings to the mesh. The model is saved to the platform. And the simulation is run on the cloud. And just like before, solving on the cloud gives you access to high performance compute resources which you otherwise might not have available to you. The specific absorption rate or SAR result is observed here. The maximum SAR value is much higher than the FCC limit, so we need to modify the design. We bring the model up again in SOLIDWORKS where we are going to add an RF absorber material. This is easily done with a block of the material that we can quickly get to conform to the existing geometry with some nice modeling features in SOLIDWORKS. This part of the demonstration was recorded by a SOLIDWORKS whiz, without a doubt, and they're going to go step by step in how to add this RF absorber material to the model. But while we're watching that, an important thing to mention is the two-way integration that exists between SOLIDWORKS and CST. So when you create a CAD model in SOLIDWORKS, you can import that model into CST, and all of the geometry and material properties, as well as the parameters, are imported into CST. So it minimizes on the manual setup that you need when you export and import SOLIDWORKS models into CST, and vice versa, going out of CST back into SOLIDWORKS. Just like before, we save the model back to the 3D Experience platform. And then reopen CST Studio Suite to check for a CAD update. And the model is ready to rerun on the cloud. The max SAR value is now well within the FCC limit, but it does come with a cost. The return loss increases way above the -10 dB limit. In order to address this, we open our schematic tool and automatically add a matching circuit to retune the antenna to our desired frequency. Reviewing our new S parameters, we see the return loss is now acceptable. Then with our new tuning circuit, we can recompute the SAR value, and this is easily done using the post-processing template. And we get our new value and export the fields. Our max SAR value increases a bit, but it is still under the FCC limit. And so we designed and optimized our human exposure compliant drug delivery device. You can see our baseline and optimized design side by side again to see how far we've come. This IASO smart device analysis is an example of what we refer to as the smart health industry domain. This is a promising domain where we expect the largest growth in the coming years. We are very optimistic this will be a big topic for electromagnetic simulation within the life sciences industry. The idea is that different kinds of medical devices would be connected to each other and to the cloud, where remote health monitoring and diagnosis would be seamlessly enabled. Here, we see smart health examples of a smartwatch and a pacemaker. In the next few slides, I'm going to discuss a few more critical applications that do a great job of highlighting the power of electromagnetic simulation. Let's look at the simulated electric field distribution on the arm of a person wearing a smart tracking device. This could be an example of a Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or GPS antenna inside the device. The image shows the phase animation of the near fields and how they propagate in free space around the body, on the body surface, as well as inside the body. We can immediately predict the far field radiation pattern would be distorted compared to the antenna radiating in free space without the human body. You can see the fields induced on the surface along the shoulder and over the head region. These kinds of surface waves could potentially couple to other body-worn devices, such as hearing aid devices, and could cause electromagnetic interference issues. It is also nice to see how fields propagate inside the body with high permittivity and hence shorter wavelengths compared to free space. These penetrating fields cause power losses in the tissues that forms the basis of SAR evaluation and potential heating. Some of the cases we can analyze are where to position the antenna in order to achieve the best far field pattern without causing high power losses, and whether a single antenna would be sufficient to provide a 360-degree coverage, or how the return loss of the antenna would be affected by placing it on the human body. These what-if scenarios hold the key to sustainable innovation for body-worn sensors and smart devices. Now, let's take a look at another application, an MRI system design. This can be quite challenging due to the overlay of different types of coils and magnets, which require different solver technologies to tackle them. I would assume that most on today's call aren't with the handful of large MRI manufacturers, but I do think this application highlights the breadth of analysis types that you can tackle with CST. First, we start with gradient coils to position the excitation around a certain region. This activates a 2D slice in the subject in the XY plane and combined with a Z gradient coil to activate a volume subsection to be imaged. These gradient coils typically operate in the kilohertz range and require quasi-static and low-frequency solvers for simulation. Then we have a main coil to create a strong static magnetic field. Typically, we would need to design a passive shield in addition to the active shielding coil as shown here. And since magnetic fields are very strong, associated mechanical deformation can occur if the coils are not designed properly. Superconducting magnets are commonly used to achieve these high field strengths, and they operate at very low temperatures with no resistive losses. If by chance there is a small resistive loss that comes into play, the temperature rises rapidly and causes the magnet to explode, an effect known as quenching. Comprehensive analysis can be done by running many possible simulations to ensure this does not happen. There is also a high-frequency coil, or the RF birdcage coil, that excites the protons in the subject in order to form an image. Internal circuitry is typically involved in order to match the RF coil to the desired frequency. Implant safety evaluations can be carried out to ensure the implants do not heat up beyond prescribed limits while imaging. A bioheat solver can be used to calculate the temperature distribution inside the body while the patient is being scanned. This takes into effect the metabolic heating and blood perfusion as well. And finally, the completely simulated image can be obtained. The brain section image may look like a real image, but this is obtained completely by simulation. We can notice certain regions of the image are brighter than others. This is probably due to imperfect coil design or excitation. Thus, the end-to-end workflow starting from gradient coil, static coil, RF coil, until the final image can be completely virtualized even before a physical prototype is manufactured. What happens in cases where the patients have metallic implants of some kind and have to undergo a scan? How do we assess the safety in these scenarios? For this, we have the ASTM standards that specify process and metrics required to evaluate passive and active implant safety in MRIs. The standard for passive implant safety requires a phantom shaped like a brick to be utilized in place of the human body. This phantom would be filled with a saline gel that imitates the tissues inside the body, while the implant is placed 2 centimeters away from the edge of the phantom. In this case, we have a knee implant construct made of titanium or chrome alloy. The MRI power is switched on for 15 minutes and then switched off, and we can see the temperature rise at the tips of the knee implant as a function of time, where it exponentially rises before the power is switched off. When the same procedure is repeated with a detailed human body model at the knee joint, we can see the electric field distribution is quite different on the implant when compared with a phantom case. This tells us that it may be important to consider the real temperature rise in the body, including blood flow and metabolic heating. We can look at 2 different approaches for the implant safety simulation. In the first case, we place the phantom with the implant embedded inside the RF birdcage coil and run the full 3D electromagnetic simulation, which takes about 40 minutes to run on a reasonable workstation to solve about 1 million mesh cells in the time domain solver. but we may want to run this for different implants and change the position of the implants and the phantom. So the question is, should we run the full model simulation each time, or would it be a smarter approach to record the near fields of the phantom without the implant and then replace the RF coil with this equivalent field source in order to quickly run multiple implants in parameter studies with a reduced mesh count? The field source closely replicates the rotating fields for the full coil, and by using a near field source equivalent, we can significantly cut down the simulation time without compromising on accuracy. As you can see, the power loss distribution in both cases are similar. I wanted to make just a quick comment on the human body models available in CST, as it's come up in the presentation now a couple times. There are a few different choices based on the application and resolution needed. For some applications, it would be easier to use the homogeneous phantom models, especially when comparing to measurement results where only a phantom can be used. However, in most cases, we would like to use a more detailed model, such as the voxel models or heterogeneous CAD models. These models represent detailed inner organs such as bones, muscle, blood vessels, nerves, etc. In addition to the geometric definition, the electromagnetic, thermal, and mechanical properties are also defined. Moving on to another application, a major risk could arise with active implants like spinal modulators and pacemakers that have embedded electronics. We need to analyze how external magnetics from an MRI, for example, interact with embedded electronics and could induce currents on the leads and PCBs, which can be catastrophic if this interference causes these devices to malfunction. Currently, there are strict regulations prohibiting patients with pacemakers to go anywhere near an MRI system. But in the future, this could be a hot topic of research where simulation will hold the key to analyzing if active implants can be certified as MRI safe or not. While so far we have discussed applications where we try to avoid heating in the tissues, there are certain treatment applications where we want to heat and destroy cells that are malignant. Especially if the tumors are tiny, it is very difficult to remove them by surgery. The liver organ is shown in this example where it is quite typical to use thermal ablation treatment. Here, an electrode is inserted into the center of the tumor while the patient is lying on a metallic ground plane. RF energy is injected into the electrode to obtain a hot spot near the electrode tip. There are two types of thermal ablation, RF and microwave. Both treatment methods aim to reduce patient symptoms, improve quality of life, and increase survival rate. An interesting question is how long and how much power is needed to be applied to the electrode. As soon as the power is switched on, we do not see a significant hotspot since the thermal phenomenon is typically much slower than the electromagnetic effects. It almost takes about 2 minutes before we see a nice ablation sphere or hotspot region, which is about 2 centimeters in diameter in this case. The power needs to be applied for another 3 to 4 minutes until the malignant cells are destroyed due to excessive heat. This is exactly where simulation can provide insights into treatment planning. If the power is applied for a longer amount of time or a higher amount of power is deposited, it could potentially destroy surrounding cells that are healthy. Another challenge is, as liver cells get heated up, their electrical conductivity changes as the phase state of the matter transitions. So it's important to take into account that temperature-dependent conductivity to perform a full bidirectional electromagnetic and thermal analysis in order to predict the maximum rise in temperature accurately. And that brings us to the end of today's presentation. To recap some of the key points, we learned a little bit about GoEngineer at the beginning, and then my colleague Carl briefly introduced some of the industry challenges and trends, and demonstrated how to model and simulate the IASO smart medical device using the 3D Experience platform. We finished that demo by looking at antenna design and optimization and its effects on human safety. Then we went through a few other applications that showcase the power of electromagnetic simulation for medical device design. If you can remember back to Carl's introduction of some of the key challenges medical device manufacturers are facing, there are two that stand out to me. The increasing development time and cost, in large part due to the reliance on physical testing, and the increasing device complexity that the market demands. I think these are very good candidates as reasons to use simulation and CST Studio Suite specifically for electromagnetic simulation. And that concludes the presentation portion of our webinar. Now let's open it up to Q&A.